Hey, if you're reading the news lately, which I assume you haven't, because the world is terrifying, you might have noticed everyone is currently fighting over the North Pole. It's not just for Christmas anymore. Countries are swarming the Arctic like a flock of seagulls, fighting over a single French fry. Russia is building bases. China is calling itself a near-Arctic state, which is like me calling myself a near-Olympic athlete because I own a pair of sneakers. The ice is melting, shipping lanes are opening up, and everyone wants to claim the frozen wasteland at the top of the world before it turns into a very expensive swimming pool. But this isn't new. The United States has had a weird, slightly creepy obsession with the big icy islands of the North Atlantic for about 8 years. Specifically these two. Greenland, which is on ice, and Iceland, which is green. Whoever named them was the original clickbait artist. Today, we're gonna talk about the times America tried to straight up buy one of them with a big bag of gold, built a nuclear city inside the other one, and politely invaded a neutral country using a bunch of seasick teenagers who had no maps. Let's start with the big boy, Greenland. It's the world's largest island that isn't a continent. It has almost no people, a lot of polar bears, and it's technically owned by Denmark, a country best known for Legos and having unpronounceable vowels. During the Cold War, the US military realized Greenland was incredibly important. Why? Because if you want to throw nuclear missiles at Russia, Greenland is a perfect sniper nest. It's right over the pole, so naturally, we tried to buy it. In 1946, President Harry Truman decided renting space wasn't enough. He wanted to own the island. So, the US Secretary of State literally walked up to the Danish foreign minister at a UN meeting and said, "Hey, how much for the ice block?" They offered 100 million in gold. Literally, gold bars. Denmark politely said, no, people live there. It's a country, not a used Honda Civic. But the US didn't take no for an answer. Since we couldn't buy it, we decided to just borrow the inside of it. Enter Project Iceworm. In 1959, the US Army Corps of Engineers showed up in Greenland and told the Danish government, "Hey, we're going to build a research base called Camp Century. We're just gonna study the snow. Totally boring science stuff. Don't worry about it." That was a lie. Camp Century was actually a cover for a top secret plan to build a massive network of tunnels inside the glacier. The goal? To hide 600 nuclear missiles under the ice, constantly moving around on trains so the Soviet couldn't target them. They brought in massive Swiss snowplows and dug trenches. Then they covered the trenches with steel arches and blew snow back over the top. Inside these tunnels, they built a literal city. It had a movie theater, a chapel, a barber shop, and a hobby shop. It was like a shopping mall, but if you went outside, you died instantly of hypothermia. To power this frozen ant farm, they brought in the world's first portable nuclear reactor, the PM-2A. Yes, they shipped the nuclear reactor to the most unstable environment on Earth. What could go wrong? Here's the problem with building tunnels inside a glacier. Glaciers move. That is literally what a glacier is. It's a slow-moving river of ice. Within a few years, the walls started warping. The ceiling started coming down. The nuclear reactor started getting squeezed like a zit. The army realized, oh no, physics exists. And they had to abandon the entire project in 1967. They left the tunnels, the buildings, and a bunch of radioactive waste buried in the ice, assuming it would stay frozen forever. Spoiler alert, the ice is melting now. So, Denmark might soon inherit a radioactive ghost town. Surprise! Moving on to Iceland. The year is 1940. World War II is popping off. The Nazis take Denmark. Britain starts panicking. They look at Iceland, sitting right there in the middle of the Atlantic shipping lanes. Britain asks Iceland, "Hey chap, mind if we set up base?" Iceland, which was neutral, said, "Please leave us alone, we just want to catch fish." So, Britain launched Operation Fork. This is, without a doubt, the most pathetic invasion of military history. The soldiers they sent were raw recruits. They had practically no weapons. Some of them had never fired a rifle. And worse, they had no maps. The commander literally had to buy a tourist map of Iceland from a shop on the way to the boat. The trip was a nightmare. The sea was rough, and the entire battalion spent the trip violently seasick. By the time they arrived to Reykjavik, they weren't ready to fight. They were ready to die of nausea. They land at the dock. There's no resistance. An Icelandic policeman told them they were breaking the law. The British commander said, "I know, sorry." And then they just walked past him. The only casualty was a British soldier who committed suicide on the boat because the trip was so miserable. Later, the US took over occupation because Britain was busy. We stayed there for 60 years. But Iceland didn't stay a pushover forever. 20 years later, they decided to fight back. Not with guns, but with cod. In the 1950s and 70s, Iceland got tired of British ships stealing all their fish, so they expanded their water borders. Britain said no, and sent the Royal Navy to protect their fishing boats. Think about this. You have destroyers and frigates facing off against tiny Icelandic Coast Guard tugboats. But Iceland had a secret weapon. It was called the net cutter. Basically, it was a big hook on a long chain that they dragged behind the boats. They would sail perpendicular to the British fishing boats and snip the cables holding the nets. A fishing net costs thousands of dollars. When the net sinks, the fishing trip is over. The British Navy tried to ram the Icelandic boats. The Icelandic boats rammed them back. It was literally a demolition derby in the freezing ocean. At one point, British sailors were so mad they were standing on the deck pelting the Icelandic ships with potatoes, flour, and coal. So how did tiny Iceland win? They played the NATO card. Iceland basically told the US, if you don't make Britain stop stealing our fish, we are gonna kick the US military out of our base and close the gap to the Soviet submarines. The US immediately panicked and forced Britain to surrender. Iceland defeated the Royal Navy 3 separate times. The moral of the story, don't touch a Viking's lunch. Fast forward to today, you might remember in 2019 when the former US president tweeted that he wanted to buy Greenland. Everyone laughed. The internet made memes. Denmark called it absurd. But here's the thing, he wasn't crazy. He was just rude. The US has always wanted Greenland. We tried to buy it in 1867. We tried in 1946. We tried again in 2019. Why? Because the Arctic is the next battleground. As the ice melts, ships can travel from China to Europe way faster over the top of the world than going through the Suez Canal. Plus, Greenland has rare earth minerals that we need for iPhones and Tesla batteries. China is currently building airports in Greenland. Russia is parking nukes next door. And the US is sitting there sweating, wishing we had closed the deal in 1946. Currently, the US is engaging in soft power. We opened a consulate in Nuuk. We gave them 12 million in economic aid. It's basically the geopolitical equivalent of buying a girl a drink and hoping she forgets you tried to buy her house 5 minutes ago. So, what did we learn today? 1. The US military will try to hide nuclear missiles anywhere, including inside of an ice cube. 2. If you ever invade a country, bring a map. 3. Never get into a naval battle with a guy named Thor, who has a giant pair of scissors. The Arctic is heating up, both literally and politically. So next time you see a headline about Greenland, don't laugh. Just remember that there are probably still 600 miles of abandoned tunnels down there, waiting to thaw out and ruin everyone's day. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, or I'll sell you back here to Denmark. Bye.